Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another edition of the Lambom Show. Today is Monday, June 28th, 2021, and we are continuing our series on fatherhood and parenting. Today, we really want to focus on bringing up children as African immigrant parents, the challenges. Last week, we talked a lot about some other issues. We talked a lot about how relationships are strained, relationships are kind of tested by the quality of the relationship. No, not by the quality of the relationship, by the coming in of children. And Vicky was able to point out to us last week that what we consider as stress and strain brought upon by children is actually just revealing things that were already there. The relationship was already stressful, already had those strains, and the children are only bringing out these. And today we want to look at how we relate, how we bring up these kids. And I want to read something that I just found out on Emmanuel Joa's Facebook page, coincidentally. He says, I teach my kids that they are braver than they seem, smarter than they know, and loved more than they think. I teach my kids that they are braver than they seem, smarter than they know, and loved more than they think. So let's go into this about teaching our kids, bringing up our kids. How do we bring up our kids? It's going to be about the how, it's also going to be about the what. But in terms of we as men, the relationships how we package all of this together to make sure that that balance. These days, there's so much talk about work and family life balance, isn't it? So we want to also talk now about how we bring up our kids and how to make sure that we balance this up with the relationship that we have. And as always, we are grateful to have BK with us. BK, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Lambert. I'm good, thank you. How are you today?
I'm grateful to be alive, and I'm happy that we're able to do this. But again, um, this is a bonus, a Father's Day bonus from last week, because we really went into deep things last week. We had Alem who had to come on to share his own experience, and we said we wanted to extend this conversation. So I don't know, where do you want to start? You want to give a recap of last week? I mean, there are a couple of points that you touched last week about fatherhood, the distinction about who is the father and the dad and all that good stuff. But what was the key takeaway for you from last week?
What did we talk about last week? Yeah, we made a distinction between the man, the father, and the dad, didn't we? The man just
Absolutely.
being the man. Yeah, absolutely. So we did highlight the fact that a man is a man. Yeah, you are male, and you embrace life. You go out into the world. You grow to the best of your abilities, and when you think you've made it as a man and you're ready to go to take on that next step, then you look at becoming usually a husband or a partner. That's usually the next phase where you're dealing with someone who is just as mature, if not more mature, if you're lucky, and who is independent as opposed to dependent. So you have two independent people coming together to give of each other to one another so they can grow to the next level. And it's always about getting to this place in life, getting to this nexus where you're ready to take the next step and you're ready to embrace the next challenge. So you're stepping out of your comfort zone, as it were, and that's what it is all about. And these stages have been carefully choreographed by the author of what we call creation and the world that we live in today. So the natural progression, boys to men, from a boy, from an infant, or from a baby to an infant, to an adolescent, to an adult, and then you slowly become that man. And from there, you become a spouse or you have a partner. Whichever way, you're a spouse or you're a boyfriend. And what's the next stage then? Kids come into play. So when you have a child, you have fathered a child. And that makes you a father. The fact that you've got a child just makes you a father. But then you need to move from there to a place where you exercise duty of care to that being that you have brought into the world. And that is where the concept of the dad comes in and kicks in. So, again, a quick recap from a man to a spouse to a father and then to a dad. And you will notice that the challenges become bigger, better, greater, and they leave you with better opportunities if only you will go through the journey and do that internal work. So, over to you.
So again, you seem to put it in terms of a linear progression from being a man to then being a spouse, a father, then a dad. I mean, to be honest with you, this whole distinction between fatherhood and being a dad, for me, it's I am worried about it. Fathers just do what they are supposed to do. Again, because it gives the impression that one has the opportunity to choose between being a father and being a dad, isn't it? I brought you into the world. Let me just leave you there. But I get the point. Anybody can be a father, but not all fathers are dads, isn't it?
That's
Um,
the idea.
yeah, and
And just to piggyback on that, Lambert, let's not forget that these are descriptions, these are adjectives. While they are nouns, they are adjectival nouns, if we could call them that. So, where you find yourself on that scale, or which rung you find yourself on that ladder, will determine what level you're operating and engaging at. So, if all you're doing is donating a sperm, you're the father. That is the way, for the purposes of this conversation, that is the distinction we would make. You are the father. It is called sometimes an absentee landlord, where you have donated the sperm, you've brought this child into the world, but that's your role, that's where it ends. And you're on to life as if this child were not present. So, from that perspective, we're being careful to define the words that we use so we can use them in a specific context because someone else will pretty much bring those words together and integrate them, and they won't make a distinction, they won't make a differentiation, they will call them synonyms. But for the purposes of this conversation, we do not want to be ambiguous, so we separate them like we do.
so at every stage of that progression from a man to a spouse to a father to a dad, there are challenges. But today we want to talk about the fact of being a dad is challenging in this environment, this milieu where we are. We live in a world that is, I mean, last week we talked about the fact that there's a lot of support, and within an African context, you have the extended family, and the extended family helps. It takes a village to raise a child, isn't it? The entire village. But I don't think it's the same thing across the board. So let's look at it, and I don't know what you think about the rest of it.
So when we say it takes a village to raise a child back in Africa or back home, it's a very it's an all-encompassing statement. See, because the responsibilities of a dad, the responsibilities of a father, all the different areas we would otherwise have to show up in are pretty much relegated. They are outsourced to the community, as it were, at large. So everybody is doing their bit, and the quote unquote dad can just focus on what they do in the bread winning domain. as it were. So obviously, come out west, the landscape changes. With a changing landscape, the challenges equally change. So you have some bigger challenges, some of which will convert into problems, some of which will convert into opportunities based on our ability to adapt in that new environment. But then a new landscape throws new challenges, new stimuli, and we have to adapt and adjust to these. Now, what are some of the greatest challenges that we face when we come out here? A, you're forced to show up in ways that you never really had to show up back home. See, the concept of hunger, for instance, just to veer out a little bit, the concept of hunger back home is completely different from the concept of hunger out here. Back home, it's easy for you to get by because of the community spirit. Out here, it's either you make it or you're done for it. So that is the very first pressure that is visited upon or visited on the man who is out here. You have to grow and grow in ways you may not necessarily have to grow. Departments and areas you would not necessarily have to develop if you were back home because of that support system and that safety net that is always willing and ready to catch you should you fall. Now, we do not have those support systems here. You become that support system when you come out here. You are everything. You're responsible for for your every need, and it's either it works, you survive and you thrive, or it doesn't work and you are lost completely. You lose your way, and there are no two ways out of it. You have no one, nobody to depend on but yourself.
So again, I think the first challenge is being able to identify that there has been a fundamental shift from what you know. Because you would agree that the problem with our parenting skills here is, again, I'm talking for people who maybe grew up in Africa, then are now in the United States or UK, wherever, raising kids in this environment. And we want to take the same parenting styles that we learned in Africa and implement here, and it becomes a little bit challenging. And like you say, hunger in Africa is not the same as hunger in the United States, isn't it? Or hunger in the UK, wherever. But then, aren't there certain values that just cut across the board that it doesn't matter where you are? It's just you know, there's no gainsaying. So maybe the thing about the context becomes irrelevant. And are we just pushing this too much? Is there really something to the environment that makes parenting a challenge?
Now, Lambert, don't forget that we all have a comfort zone. And for as long as we're operating within the confines of our comfort zone, by and large, we have we can control ourselves. Everything is in check. Once we're thrown out of our comfort zone, it becomes a new challenge. And we adapt to this new challenge in positive and or in negative ways. We've equally identified the fact that when we come out here, I mean, it's all part of the gambit and the nuance of life. So, what is really happening when we talk about? We'll just zoom in. We'll just zoom into parenthood. What is happening when we look at the parent? See, it's interesting because we like to deceive ourselves that we are raising kids. I use the word deceive ourselves very carefully. See, because I ask myself the question: are we the ones raising these kids, or is it the kids raising us? That's a statement I'd like us to ponder and reflect on for 2 minutes. You call yourself a dad. I call myself a dad. Let us look at the progression, who we have become, the challenges we have met, greeted, embraced as a function of being a dad. Would you say you've become a better person because you are a dad, or a worse person? And if you'd not had that child, if you'd not had the kids that you had, would you be half the man you are today? Beggars believe. That's the question that I ask myself. I don't know about you, but for me, I know that without my kids, I would not be 1/10 the person I am today. So who's raising who? Am I raising them, or are they raising me? Or is it a partnership? So I want us to slowly move away from these appellations, from these concepts, from the world as we know it. Go back to first principles and look at things from that level. And then we can bring it back to what our discussion is, which is the challenges of being a dad out here in the West. We've identified the fact, and we'll be talking and coming back to these. We've identified the fact that it is a different landscape. A different landscape will throw different challenges at you. The extent to which you show up, how present you have to be, how much and to what extent you have to engage. The fact that you have to be changing nappies, something which you would not even have thought of remotely back home. It would not even have crossed your mind. In fact, in the days of nappies, I'm sure there are dads who did not even know that a child needed a nappy and what you did with that nappy when it got soiled. But then you come out here, not only are you part of every step of that journey, to the point where you go for birth lessons. You accompany your spouse when she's going for birth lessons, pre-birth training. Not sure what they call it these days. You as a man, you actually need to make the time to go there and listen to those lectures. You have to prepare for the event. Whereas back home, it was a non-event. As long as you had donated your sperm, you could literally fade into the deep recesses of absence and stay in that corner until the child came home. But now you're a part of that journey, and you have to be if you're going to be supportive. That's where the journey starts. So you notice you're already beginning to do things which you otherwise would not have done. And for some people, these are things they would rather not want to do, but feel they had to do. So that's where the challenge starts. You talked about freedoms. Am I losing my freedoms? Why do I have to do this? How am I coping with this? And then the child comes. Let's not talk about the sleepless nights. How do you navigate these sleepless nights? Again, it's a challenge. The mother has to breastfeed the child. Somebody will have to put the child to sleep after the child has been breastfed. It means a lot of coordination. It means a lot of communication between the two parties, between husband and wife. And if that's not working, then that opens a crack. Because if it's not working, it's either you communicate and you grow, or there's lack of communication and you disintegrate, or the relationship suffers. Emptiness sets in, rancor and discord. So we're right back to what? Communication. See, because you slowly move away from a place where you used to talk about the pleasantries and, oh, is there food? Or, oh, by the way, where's my food? Or who's doing this and who's doing that? Now you're forced to have more intimate conversations around the finer, more delicate things in life, as far as that child is concerned. What time are you going to bed? What is the child's routine? So when you wake up at a particular hour, if you breastfeed the child, how can I come in? How can I help? How can I add value? How can I be resourceful? That's for the person who has decided that they will show up, that they need to show up, and that they will show up, and they're not showing up because they have to, they're showing up because they want to. So this is the foreign territory that I'm talking about. Then, of course, there is the question, if you're already up, what's the point having me up? How do we, again, it comes down to dialogue. Because you have some people who would think, oh, well, you're breastfeeding, I'm breastfeeding and you're sleeping. Why don't you keep me company? Does that make sense? If you can't agree on that, well, if it makes sense for a couple, then that's great. But if it doesn't make sense again, then what's the point? So there are lots of little challenges that will be thrown at you as a couple. But the real challenge is, can you communicate and can you reach consensus on these little things that mean everything?
So a couple of points that you touch on there, and I want to welcome if you're just joining us here on the Lambom Show. Again, we are talking about challenges of parenting to immigrant men in Europe and America. So something you mentioned about presence, and I want to bring on a comment. The problem with being present is very deep, since the man in Africa does not deal without 9 yards. Okay, so the question I have is this presence that we talk about. What is it? Because remember that if the man has to bring home bread, it means he has to be away for some time, isn't it? How does he balance off being the breadwinner and also being present? So where I'm going to with this is, you have a man who has been at work all day. He comes home, and the wife now thinks that it's time for him to take over with the kid, and he starts fussing that have been at work, as if the woman has been at home not doing anything. But I guess the key to the question, the key to what you are saying here is, there will be those cracks. If you are able to communicate about those cracks, you can easily overcome them. But I guess it becomes kind of challenging because the man is already worn out, maybe beaten at work, tired, abused, and all that, and he comes home and he starts hearing something again, it becomes an issue. How do you communicate within that kind of a framework? And what do you really mean by presence?
So presence is everything, every piece of every ingredient that is required in order to keep that ecosystem going. Each person playing their role. You see, if a man all of a sudden decides that his role is being the breadwinner, I don't know of many women out west who just stay at home, who are stay at home wife. And I'm sure you'd agree with me that being a stay at home wife, sometimes it's better to go out and work. Let's look at the tenets of running a home today, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
So you wake up in the morning, you have to make sure that everything is spick and span. All T's have been cut, all I's dotted. Everything is where it needs to be. Then you sort out breakfast. Then you clean the house. Then you do the laundry. Then you do the dishes. No sooner are you barely half done. Okay, there is the shopping. Let's not even talk about that. There are the little bits and pieces that you need to step out. Oh, this is running out. You need to plan that into your schedule. And then you need to do lunch. And then, of course, you need to do dinner. And then there is all the cleaning that goes with it. So 24/7, you are on call as a housewife. We're talking about the housewife, by the way. let's be clear. We're talking about the housewife. She does nothing but take care of the house. Now, you're not seeing people. You can engage and interact with people because everyone else is at work. Most of your friends are at work. So you get drained by default. By virtue of the fact that you're home, there's this human interaction and human engagement is not there. You are drained. And the free time that you have is torture. especially if you're not doing anything particularly productive with it, because there's nothing productive to do, especially if you've done everything that needs to be done. But then again, so at the end of the day, you produce you make dinner, your husband comes, you welcome him, you're all excited because you haven't had him all day. And listen to what you just said, Lambert. She's looking forward to the only interactive engagement she'll have all day. Guess what? You're tired, or so we claim. Are we really tired? Because although we may claim to be tired at that particular point in time, if a friend were to call and to invite us out to an engagement, I'm sure we would answer present. If a friend called and wanted to have a chat, I'm sure we would be not only alive, we would come alive and we would be making some interesting proposals. So they always say the things that we're not interested in, we make excuses for. Because when we love something, when we're into something, nobody needs to ask us. What you and I are doing, for instance, Lambert, let's be honest, you've had a full day's work. I've had a full day's work. Yet I'm here doing this and nobody's paying me a dime. And I've got this smile on my face that you couldn't pay me to smile. So what do we mean when we say, oh, we come back from home having won the bread and we're all exhausted and tired and just want to keel over, roll over and die and be let alone? Is that fact or is it farce? Would you like to chime in before I continue?
No, absolutely. I
Before
mean, I get. I think you make a very important point in terms of the things we are not interested in. We make excuses for, and I guess that's it. Um, like you say, if a friend called at the time, you pick up the call. You forget about the fact that you just mentioned that I'm just coming back from work. I'm also tired. Uh, but beyond just that, again, those are day-to-day examples. Isn't there? I mean, I know we have talked about competition here before. The problem with these issues is when we think that we are competing with or against each other to as to who is doing more at home. It would be nice to have that competition in a positive sense, isn't it? But the competition often rubs off the wrong way. And then it starts being that because one stayed home all day, they have not done enough work as opposed to the one who went out, you know. And for us, I'm really trying to see where the challenge is. I don't want to just say it is more of the fact that we are making excuses. I'm also avoiding the fact that we are competing with each other. There's something fundamental that I want to challenge that men are not getting. Something fundamental. And I'm trying to get at what is it we don't get? What is it we men don't get in bringing up children that keeps us away from being directly present? Because very often when they talk about broken homes, it's always the man who is absent. The women will generally be there. I mean, I'm being generic here, but what is it that the man is missing?
it's interesting you raise that because if you ask me, hey Jenny, answer the question. Thanks, Jenny. I think you should be on this platform really. Because can you bring back Ejeni's statement, please? Because my response is going to be based on that. She says it and she articulates it very well. The problem with being present is very deep since the man in Africa does not deal with that 9 yards. And so we will look for every excuse under the sun to not have to go there. You said something very instrumental. You talked about competition. You talked about the arguments that ensue. Oh, I've been out all day, and oh, I'm tired. Oh, I do more. What have you been doing? Well, you can ask that question in two ways. Honey, how was your day today? Let her talk. Let the two of you connect. I'm sure you would agree with me that when two people engage, exchange energies, they build synergies. They end up being inspired, they end up being fired up, they end up being elated, and their energy levels just explode. So the only time two people get to a point where they are competing, it's because something has happened somewhere along the lines that clearly indicates that one or both of them is not ready for that phase of the journey. Being in denial, realizing there's a part of your life which needs to go, which has become redundant, understanding that you got a promotion, you have more power, and with that power comes the burden of responsibility. So you can't go out and play with your friends like you used to because there are more important things to do. There are schedules that don't have to go or find different time frames because there are more important things to do. See, that decision to have a child is a commitment. It's not just a pleasure. It's not the fun. It is signing up to some promotion, signing up to an ideal that will grow you. And at the end of that growth is a reward which you don't get to see, meet, greet, or embrace until you meet, greet, and embrace it. So for as long as we resist, we would be in a state and frame of mind which I call being stuck. You're going around in circles, doing the same things, looking for everything to complain about. You complain about her. You complain about the air in the house. You complain about the mood. You complain about every single thing you can lay your fingers on. And those complaints are usually, generally, typically not genuine. They are just our way of saying, this I don't want to accept. This I don't want to deal with. And why is that? Because we have different needs. We're looking for different needs. We've talked about needs time and again. So the child will bring out everything that is wrong in the relationship. The child will equally push its parents to grow and to come up higher because it will take both, he or she will take both parents outside of their comfort zone. So we all have a need for variety, and it is in this space. What is variety? Variety is it's a headspace, or it's a place of the unknown. And I'm sure you would agree with me that this is where we get innovative. So they always say adversity is the mother of invention. If we knew everything, we wouldn't have to grow, we wouldn't need to grow. We have to shift outside of our comfort zone in order to embrace growth. And that is what happens with childbirth. So childbirth is a process that forces us to make that shift if we had become complacent, if we were stuck in our comfort zone. And the home is the sanctuary for that spiritual growth, for that divine growth. You see, at work, it's very easy because you know what it is you need to put in. If you put this in, you get that out. The right attitude, the right behavior, you can fake it, you would still make it because you would fool the whole world around you. Besides, you're only spending about 8 hours of your day there. So for 8 hours, you can pretend to be something that you're not. You can't do that at home. So you do all that pretense at work, you come home, that's where the test begins. And if you really wanted to grow, that's where rubber meets the road. And it's time to fire on all cylinders, embrace the challenge, and be the man you thought you were before you chose the path that came with it, the spouse that became your wife, and the child that became your kid. Do you want to chime in before we carry on? I think you're on mute if you're saying anything. Can't hear
Yeah.
you.
So I'd like us to shift the conversation a little bit. Let's go to parenting. And there's an article that uh, it's kind of funny the way it's entitled. Are fathers still necessary? And that conversation is a deep conversation here in the Western world with respect to the fact that we have many homes that are being, run by single mothers. And those kids come out to be very successful kids. So check out your basketball stars. How many of them come from a home where they had father and mother? Take your LeBron James, for example. That's a
Yes.
great basketball star, isn't it? Raised by the mom. And the question becomes, do we really need this dad even? And
So that's
Barack Obama, the former president of the United States, actually formed an organization that's meant, building up young men to be good fathers, to be great fathers, isn't it? My brother's keeper is meant to, again, re-educate African American men on the necessity of fatherhood. Why it is important for them to be in the lives of the kids. You are living two parallel realities because it seems as if we have grown knowing that the man provides, and because we have grown knowing that the man provides, the man has to do everything to provide. But then he's forgetting that you live in a world where both of you can do the provision and you need to be present. How do you provide to your kids and at the same time be present in the lives of your kids so that they grow up to be balanced people and do not come out to be? I'm not making any presumption here that the dropouts in our society, the criminals in our society, all those come from homes that are broken. I'm not making that presumption. The question I'm asking is, how do we raise our kids in an environment where there is a likelihood of a broken home producing kids who are successful than those of us who seemingly have very stable homes whose kids never rise to that level because maybe probably we stifled a couple of things.
okay. That's a valid question. Let's start with the whole concept of success. It's a word that we throw about very loosely, a word we so do not understand. If success is being able to pay bills, have a roof over your head, have 3 square meals a day, and the odd holiday, then I think we're missing the plot. That's survival. That's not success. Success has nothing to do with who I know, what I have. Success has everything to do with what is left, how I feel when everything I have and those I know are taken away from me. When I'm stripped of what I own and who I know, how do I feel on the inside? If I feel whole, if I feel like I'm good enough, then I'm successful. You see, because from that place you can manifest anything. But if success is measured by what I own and who I know, it means when you take those things away from me, I become unsuccessful. And that is the conundrum. That is where we all lose the plot. And you have people chasing these things, thinking it will bring them happiness, only to eventually get them and realize there's a big void. So let's talk about this whole concept of a dad raising the child. See, what's the role of a dad? We talked about provision. Isn't it funny again that when we talk about provision, our entire focus rests on what is physical? It rests on that roof over our head and food and that holiday and all the other perks that come with it. That is the way we define success. We don't look at the spiritual side of it. We don't look at enlightenment to a point where that child feels like they can salvage actual lives. You talked about LeBron. Let's go there. Notice that he was brought up by his mom, and for him, basketball, by and large, was his dad, especially if that's where he spent most of his life. And if he had a coach growing up, or at whatever point he had a coach, and the fact that he was that good, you would notice he was fortunate because of his talent to attract father figures into his life. People who played that role, who played the role of a dad, but you and I never got to hear about. So you see, for him, it was more of a lottery because when we talk about, oh, well, look at him, he was successful. We've not counted the millions, the billions who fell by the wayside and nobody bothered to count. They went unnoticed. In fact, they got shot. And we read about them in the news, but it didn't register that, hey, these are some of those people we're talking about. So we go out and we focus on the LeBrons, James, who is the exception and not the rule. And if we're not careful, we make that the standard. And that is where we start coming up with such callous statements as, are these dads really necessary? Are fathers necessary? Oh, well, without fathers, there'd be no kids. Are dads necessary? Well, if we're looking for kids who are rounded, who are whole, then absolutely. I'm sure you would agree with me that when kids are growing up in the dynamics of a home, if you came into this house, for instance, my kids argue with their mother all the time. They love her to bits. That's where they spend all their time with her. Sometimes I'm like, what am I doing wrong? But guess what? When it comes to discipline, what she would need about 2 hours to communicate to get them to do, all I have to do is look in their direction and they adjust. There is just something about the dad. It instills a sense of direction. It instills bearings, especially if values are upstanding. And that's not something you can play down. You see, because who that child is, the navigation system that guides them when they are out in the real world, that is something that they usually, by and large, typically are more inclined to get from a father figure or a father figure or a dad. It can't come from a mom. But already we know that the mother is a nurture, is the place they go to when they need a cuddle, when they want to be carried, when they want to be pampered. So that's the way they see mommy. Mothers are never really associated with discipline. And when you look at a home, again, we're talking about complementarity. In order for that child to be whole, they need the nurturing nature of the mother and the hunter nature of the father. Talk about male and female energies. One is playful, one is romantic, seductive, and the other one is cut and dried, go get. And that is the balance. And that's the only reason a man and a woman would ever come together, because they complement each other. Now, if you've got this complementarity in a home, then the child is getting the best of both worlds. If it grows with just one, then obviously it is incomplete. And it will have to find a way to complement itself. Like I just said, and I will repeat, some people get lucky because they've got a talent. That talent will attract a father figure, and that father figure becomes a dad. But it's not written anywhere. Or conversely, the father figure becomes the drug is. Eugenie says, as a woman, I say we need the fathers because the man learns manhood from men, not the woman or not the women. Would you like to comment on that, Lambert?
I think she basically agrees with you, isn't it? There's something about um, the man that can only be communicated by a male figure. And I'm saying this again. This was some show last week that talked about women who wanted to celebrate Father's Day because they are the fathers of the house, based on the fact of being a single mother and playing both roles. And the issue was simple. There's no way a man can ever be a woman, and there's no way a woman will ever be a man. You can talk
That's
about transgender, you can talk about whatever. There is no way that
the
is ever going to
force,
happen.
total force. Yeah,
Yes. And I agree with you that, I have friends, three of my friends, they all lost their dads when they were like, so one lost the dad when he was 2 weeks old. Another one lost the dad when he was like 2 years, and a third one lost the dad when he was maybe like 5. Those are great men in their own right. They grew up with their mom, they love their mother so much, but they are great men. And we are saying the point you just made, which is so crucial, is the fact that they became great men not just by the fact that they grew up with their mom played both roles, but because even while they were growing with their mom, there were father figures in their lives. And there's one example that I want to use of a friend. Every time he did something wrong, he had to write an apology, and that apology had to go to a priest. So the apology came to the mother through the priest. The mother never took the apology from any one of them. So again, there's a father figure, and you are now scared not so much about mom, but because you don't want to write these letters often and bring to father. There is that. And so the point about making sure that as a man, you understand the role you have to play in a child's life, in a child's development, and all that is something that should be enriching, as challenging as it is. It is something that is irreplaceable in a certain sense. And so you deprive kids by your absence when you're not able to play this role directly. I mean, it gets fuzzy when you say, okay, the man is there and you have to depend on teachers in school, you have to depend on others because that's the point we're making. We are saying, in the absence of a dad, there are other dad figures. That is not the optimum condition. If every father stepped up to be a dad, then we'll have less problems. I mean, I may be exaggerating, but I guess that's the point we're making.
that exactly is the point we're making. And we've
So,
always talked about, yeah.
no, go ahead.
Now, I was just going to say, we've always talked about the unit or the family as the smallest unit and fabric of society, which means if we get the family wrong, then society will pay the price because leadership gets its crop of leaders from where? From the home, which is why it is very important that the 7 pillars of society are catered for and catered to, with the family being the most important one. You see, you leave the home, where do you go? Education, schools. So if the home is not getting it right, the school can't do a whole lot with those kids because the job of the school is to educate. It is to feel the intellect. It is not to get the child to understand who they are. That's what happens at home. If you don't know who you are, it doesn't matter what I do with you. It's like they say, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. If you are if you are a villain and you're poor, it's safe. A villain with power is a problem for everyone. And these are the things that we really need to understand, grasp, and be bought into the fact that the only place where this can really be addressed is within the home. And if there's anything to invest anywhere, it is with the home. The health system is great, but what is the point having a sophisticated health system if all it will do is ensure that delinquents are healthy? Healthy enough to ply and to run the streets and to make everyone's lives miserable. So these are the things we want to be looking at. So again, it comes back to these seven pillars of society. Seven pillars of society, which are the seven pillars that rule society. There is education, there is business, there is entertainment. What are the other ones? There is media, there is obviously religion. We've talked about politics, I believe. And again, you notice these are the different pillars that keep society going. But who are the ones running these pillars? Who do you put within these pillars? Where do these people come from? They come from the home. So the home is the most important unit. And for that dad or father who's absent, because it is the presence that makes them a dad, if only they understood the contribution that they make to society, and we're all called upon to contribute. When you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you realize that growth and contribution are the highest. They rank highest because that's where fulfillment lives. That is what fulfillment is all about. Finding who you are, getting to a point where your number one and overarching need is to make a difference, to serve a purpose that is bigger than the self, to go out there and contribute and empower others. And the home is the place where you learn to become that person. And then eventually you take that out into the community. So it's an opportunity to get to a place or to come to a place not only of enlightenment, because that child is going to force you to become enlightened, but of self actualization. Because once you become enlightened, which is a state and frame of being, it's a state of being, then you can manifest it, which is the actualization. You go out into the world and with others, you exchange these energies and you build synergies to make the world a better place.
So, BK, let's spend the last couple of minutes talking about some particular things that are worrying. We touched
Sure.
on them last week, and I want us to circle back a little bit to it because there are many parents who are wondering what is happening to their kids. They no longer recognize these kids. Well, like all of a sudden, my son doesn't want to talk to me. He's now hanging out with bad friends, peer pressure.
Yeah.
They are smoking,
Yeah.
doing all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And the parents are like, what can I do? Again, like we said, back home in Africa, the influence of the village as in the community, everybody
Yeah.
is a discipline master, isn't it?
Yes.
If I see my neighbor's child doing something, I'm not going to wait for my neighbor to come back and I start telling my neighbor. I will go ahead and correct the child. You can't do that here.
No, you can't.
Yes. So you find that it becomes challenging to be able to, as parents, even when people are living, you are the father is there, mother is there, doing everything, working. Then all of a sudden they say, I can't realize my own child. I can't recognize my own child.
Yeah.
What is the problem?
Let's start at the beginning. You use an expression all of a sudden. Do you remember that expression?
Yes.
Okay. Without being too mean, I would say, well, to put it nicely, they bent the truth. To put it bluntly, That's a lie. It never happens all of a sudden. You see, when the child is not yet of age, the child will comply with what appears to be the rules and regulations, the terms of engagement within a household. Not because that child has subscribed to these rules and regulations and all terms of engagement. Not because the child understands why it's been asked to do the thing that it's been asked to do. It feels compelled. And in that compellation, it's almost like you're transgressing the child's spirit. But fear will not let them articulate themselves. Should I say that again? So it all starts with the way you communicate with these kids. We tend to over assume that they are children, and so we treat them as if they were stupid. We overwrite them, we berate them, we embarrass them, and because they are scared, they never really come back. They never really talk back. Now, the question is, see, the whole all of a sudden thing is when that child has come of age and they are on the other side of their fear, they're not scared of you anymore. That's when you see what you've been brewing. That's when you see what you've been grooming. There's something wrong with your lighting, Lambert. We're going to have to sort that out.
I
I
think I know
think,
what
yeah,
I know
because,
what the problem is.
yeah,
I
okay,
have to plug into the router rather than using the Wi-Fi.
okay, that's fine. Yeah,
Yeah, so it
right,
means
cool.
I have to get
Yeah. And it doesn't help that I can actually see the lights as well, but we will sort that out. Yeah, anyway, like I was saying, when that child overcomes its fear, or when the kids overcome their fear, then the parents have a problem to deal with. They have a problem to grapple with. Are we good? Can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you, and that's important. So I get it. Nothing happens all of
Okay.
a sudden, isn't it?
Yes,
Nothing
absolutely.
happens.
Yeah.
Yes, it's something that has
No,
happened. Yeah.
it has
Okay.
been happening over time, and the parents were just not engaged enough, not present enough to notice that they were, in fact, handing these kids over to the strangers. See, because ultimately, that child is going to find a voice. They need a shoulder to cry on. Kids will always need a shoulder to cry on. Kids will always have a go to person or a go to area where they run with their problems, their challenges, where they run for answers. If you're not a person as a parent, you're doing something wrong. Adjust it. If your child doesn't, out of the blue, impromptu, comes to you to say, okay, now this is what I'm struggling with, or this is what happened. I didn't know how to deal with it. How do I do A, B, C, or D? How do I navigate these uncharted waters? If your kids are not doing that, then something is not happening. And there are telltale signs. You ask your kid, um, how was school today? Fine. What did you do in school? Nothing much. It means there is no communication. And while there is a phase where kids will do that, especially teenagers, again, you want to you want to establish that communication or that conversation earlier on. You want to know what it is that they're interested in. Because everybody likes to talk about what they're interested in. And then again, something we may not always be aware of as parents, because kids are so aware of the fact that we want to make them something or someone they are not. Sometimes they just rebel. So whenever you're asking questions, and we've jumped into the part where we're now dealing with the problem, how do you engage a child who has seen you as persona non grata? That child who has decided that the only time you talk to them is when you want them to do something for you, or when you want to tell them off, or when you want to give them work. And it's never really about their needs and their wants. How do you deal with that? Obviously, you need to then go back to their childhood to find out, to figure out the things that they were interested in, or you want to look around and see the things that they are interested in. What is it they do in their spare time? Who are their friends? What do they do with their friends? How can you be a part of that? How can you engage at that level? And if you're asking them a question, is it always academics? Is it always career driven? Is it always help reminding them how conscientious they should be and must be because they will someday become independent? Or is it reminding them to ensure that they have fun and sponsoring that fun so they can trust you enough to come to you with things that are not necessarily fun? Are we on the same page?
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. And I have a direct question.
Sure.
Um, at what age did you give your child a cell phone?
At what age did I give my kids cell phones? Let's start by asking ourselves what a cell phone is. Like anything else, Lambert, I'm sure you would agree with me that a cell phone is a tool like any other tool. Is that a fair question? Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Which means it doesn't mean anything. It is only as good as the purpose that it serves. Do we agree?
Yeah.
If it is only as good as the purpose that it serves, then we can assume horses for courses. We can take age out of the equation. If I start sending my child out to places where they have to be independent at a very young age, I'm sure you'd agree with me that having a phone with them where I can call them to find out what is happening, what they are doing, where they are at, becomes a necessity and not a luxury. Is that a fair point?
Yes.
The moment my kids started engaging in activities where I was not present, where we were not present, my wife and I, and where we needed, for whatever reason, to get in touch, or where they had to get in touch with us, or when they started having friends with whom they needed to chat. So the question now is they've got this vehicle of communication. They've got this tool that can allow them engage and interact with their friends. I engage and I interact with my friends, don't I? Now, if they can't always go to visit their friends and they have got these friends we approve of. And I know that it is through social interactions and social engagements that people develop. How do you make that happen? Through a phone. And now you've given them a phone, you know what the risks, what the challenges are. It means you need to teach them how to use that tool responsibly. You need to teach them about electromagnetic radiation and what it does to the brain. You need to let them understand that they don't want to sleep, they don't want the phone on their bodies because it can cause A, B, C, or D downstream. They should always use their headphones. You want to let them know that first thing we did, we watched Social Dilemma together as a family. So they got to see and understand the ramifications and repercussions of using and or abusing these tools. We got to show them that they are addictive. And then we tell them, before you go to bed, leave your phone here or switch it off at a certain time. And then we observe and we monitor. We do spot checks and we have an agreement. If you break any of these rules, in order to help you grow and become more responsible, we take your phone away from you for a week. And now they use those phones exceedingly responsibly.
Thank you. I mean, I was just making sure that I did not do the wrong thing because I my daughter is turning 11. Kayla is turning 11 in October, but she has been crying for a cell phone. I was using it more to say, I don't think you're mature enough to get a phone. Okay. But I had to oblige because she did well in school, and that's why. But again, I think the more important issue is the reason for it. And I love the rules of engagement. And one thing that you mentioned here, which is something that um, families are encouraged, I would say it here: learn to sit and watch movies with your kids. Learn to sit and watch at home. You may not mean taking them to the movie theater. You don't need to do that. I mean, let me not say you don't need to. There is a place for that. But there are more messages that you'll be able to pass across to kids during those moments. It's not just you talking. Maybe you have said it, they're able to see it at this point. And I think it's a very great tool, again, like you said. Again, our friend Jude, the parenting style of the Western world is much more democratic. Parents in the Western world are responsive to their children and generally have an accommodating and accepting disposition towards their questions. When children fail to meet perceived expectations, parents Western parenting orientation are more nurturing and forgiving rather than punishing. African parents are aversive to the Western parenting style and invariably run into a lot of problems. What's your take, Vicky?
I think he just said everything I've been struggling to say all along, just slightly better than, or just significantly better than I did.
Okay, so again, is I think that's the benefit of it. I mean, I have a problem with those characterizations. There are certain things that are good in this culture. There are certain things that we can learn how to parent, how to bring up our kids. And if you ask me, the one lesson for today is about that definition of success. We define success in terms of the things we have, in terms of the things we own, but not in terms of who we are. And I'm saying, yeah, the point you are making today is for us to think about who we are as people when we are stripped off of those things. That is what makes us successful people. And so successful parenting doesn't have to only get into the context of providing these things, but also being present and being there. Who we are impacts our kids. We become teachers, we become coaches, we become heroes for our kids when we are present. It is a challenge. And the other question I have for you is, today we find many families among African immigrants, we find that parents are not talking to each other. They have a problem and they say, let's just stay for the sake of the kids. When the kids grow, we can go our ways. What do you think?
So it is unfortunate. We're talking about two people who do not understand what life is really all about. They don't understand that, as it were, they were passing up on a significant opportunity. They don't understand that being together is not about physicality, it is spiritual, because those kids will pick the vibes between them, and those vibes that they exude will destroy those kids long before whatever it is they thought separation would have caused would get to the kids. Now, I say that with caution, and it's hypothetical, but then I know that, spiritually speaking, vibe and energy count for so much. The mood in a room will determine how well a plant responds. Now, if a plant can respond to a mood in the room, and these have been shown and proven by experiments from well-renowned scientists. If you can notice that with plant life, how much more human life. So when people realize that life is going to push us to get to go above our perceived limitations, life is going to push us to move away from being judgmental. Life is going to push us to be more accepting of who people are. on the simple premise that when we learn to accept people as they are, not as we want them to be, and we make changes that empower us, the people we engage and interact with change. When we start looking at the people we interact with differently, those people begin to change, and it's usually positive change. It is only intransigence between two people that will get them to a place where they say, "Oh, let's just stay together for the sake of the kids," and that's a lie, by the way. Because I don't think any well, I use that expression carefully as well. I don't think there are two people who can endure each other just for the sake of the kids. There is something there which they're not tapping into. See, because if they're doing it for the sake of the kids, they communicate, and if they can communicate, it means they have something. The two of them have something. If they didn't have something, they would not be able to stay there for the kids. They may be too proud to say, "I'm here because of you," and each person is waiting for the other one to say, "Oh well, it's really not just you. It's really not just the kids. There's equally something about you that obviously I admire, that I love." We've come to this impasse where you just don't seem to get me, and I just don't seem to get you, and we're not in the place where we're willing to communicate, and nobody wants to be hurt anymore. So they back up. Nobody wants to be the adult in the room, and I think that is extremely unfortunate because when that happens, it is the kids who suffer. So the two adults take themselves hostage, hold themselves in bondage, but it is the kids who really suffer because by and large they will replicate what they see in their own homes when they grow to become adults and form their own partnerships. You see, because it's very easy for us to replicate that which we know. We just become what we know because that's the programming, that's what we're used to, that's what we know how to deal with. That ability to engage and interact, commitment becomes a problem. So there are so many fallouts. And while I wouldn't want to say two parents in that place are selfish, I don't call it selfishness because selfishness will sound like they were doing it deliberately. No, they just may not understand themselves enough to realize that what they have in front of them is an opportunity, a stepping stone, an opportunity for growth. And if they were to come to get to rise above whatever it is they define as pain, they would find fulfillment on the other hand. Fulfillment that would change their lives so radically they wouldn't believe that all it took was that little step to make a giant leap. I'll say that again. It would be so radical they won't believe that all it took or all it would take is a little step in order to make a giant leap. Back to you, Lambert.
So, Mr. James Cole, to be present in the life of the kid, parents have to be able to provide and take care of their needs. When the man isn't able to provide, will communication still be the same between the parents? Will this have an effect in the proper upbringing of the kid? Factors beyond the man's control can affect him from being a better parent. And I'll say, James, give me an example of a factor beyond the man's control. What's an example of something beyond the man's control that can affect him from being a better parent? But BK, you wanted to respond?
Yes. So let's take it piecemeal. Parents have to be able to provide and take care of their needs. And that's a very important point, James. What we as parents may want to have failed to understand sometimes is that their psychological and emotional needs are by far more important to these kids, than their physical needs. And sometimes we pay a lot of emphasis, we give a lot of attention to these physical needs, and we neglect their emotional and their psychological needs. So you could find yourself in a place where you're telling your kids, "Hey, look, um, I'm not sure what we're going to eat today," and your kids are saying, "Don't worry, Dad. Don't worry, Mom. We'll be okay. We'll be fine. By the way, just do what you're doing. We can manage." That is the product of love. You see, love will bring with it perspective which you can never even begin to understand. It will bring understanding, it will bring patience, it will open them up to that ability to give and to forgive the things you thought were unforgivable because you measure yourself the way society measures you. We are so, we're entrapped. We've subscribed to society's definition of success, society's definition of presence, that we don't realize that the most important things in life are three. Love. You don't need to be a rich man in order to love. In fact, it's the other way around. The more money we have, it looks like the harder it is for us, the harder it becomes for us to love. And love is all that these kids really need. Love and connection. Make them feel significant and valued. Make them feel safe, secure, and comfortable. Spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically first. And everything else will flow from that. When a man isn't able to provide, so again, notice we're talking about provide and provision. And I'd like to I'd like to assume here, James, that when you talk about provide again, you're focusing so hard on the physical side of things. And for us men, it is a bit of a challenge because we want to know that we're significant. We want to know that we count. We want to know that we're loved and respected. And if we don't feel we're significant, we can neither love, give, or accept love. And what is this significance? It's all about provision. Because you're not going to be recognized. We think we're not going to be recognized if we're not doing something that people can see, that everyone can see. So, yes, my daddy gave me this. My daddy did this for me. Well, what about my daddy who really loves me? There is a giving there which surpasses every physical provision. So we start measuring the love we get based on our own barometers. We start measuring our ability to provide based on our own shortcomings, our limited view of the world, which is based on the physical. Oh, I buy books, pay fees, pay fees, buy clothes, pay for a vacation. All those things are good, they're great. But I'm sure you know of situations, scenarios where people are drowning in wealth and affluence and committing suicide by the day, by the hour. So, what went wrong there? Society always has a way with telling us that we have got it all wrong. There needs to be a role reversal of sorts. Do we always get the message? No, we don't. Because again, we're pulled by the entrapment that is our own society. And the people who make these things so valuable, the people who sell these things to us, are the people who need for us to buy into these things so they can sell to us. See, because if it's all physical, everything that you're providing that is physical has to be bought. So if we subscribe to that religion and that becomes our God, then we're doing someone else's bid. We just keep these companies running. And I'm not saying they're a bad thing. No, they're not. It's just we give them more value than they really should have. It gets so bad at some point, provision will mean, oh, I need to get my kids a phone. Every other child has a phone. So I'm not doing well as a parent because I can't afford a phone for my kids. It gets that crazy, as nuanced as it may sound. So will communication still be the same between the parents? How mature are the parents? What is this provision? If you're dealing with two people who are ready, willing, they're going somewhere and they know that they will get there. They know that all they have to do is put one foot in front of the other. It's not how fast they get there, it is that they constantly do what they need to do to take that next step. We were all once nothing. And it is from that place of nothingness that we manifested who we are today. James, look at that suit on you. Oh my goodness, look at that tie. I would kill for it. Hey, you didn't always have any or all of that. And if you could have it once, it means you can have it again. So if someone were to strip you of that suit and or of that tie, does that mean you don't have them? No, it doesn't. Because if you want it, you could just manifest it again. There's nothing that you can manifest that is bigger than who you are. If it came from you, then it is just a sign of your potential. All it does is it tells you this is where you are. You can do by far better. So it is just confirming to you that you are a man of your word. It is just exposing to you a tiny, weeny bit of your potential, the tip of the iceberg. And if you use that to define you, then the day I strip that off you, you're done, you're finished, your identity is gone. Is that who you are? No. But you'll be surprised how many of us sometimes fall into the deep, get sidetracked. We fall on the wayside because we get distracted by all these things. The feeling of inadequacy, that's where it starts. And we need to beat that feeling and realize that what we're going through is not who we are. Is it easy? No. Is it a challenge? Absolutely. But then that is where the growth happens, and that is the most important thing. So the more challenging things are, the more two people want to start communicating. So how do we handle what is the challenge we're dealing with right now, and what is the best way of dealing with it? When you start talking, you start realizing that opportunities start showing up, doors start opening. But if you do not engage in communication, if you do not verbal elate, then those doors don't open. Without communication, nothing will happen because you will do nothing. And if you do nothing, nothing happens. You have to do something, take action for something to happen. And when something starts happening, then you ask yourself if that is the direction you want to go, that's the path you want to follow. If it's not, then you make adjustments for the desired outcome. But you continue doing something. And communication is the most integral part of that doing something. Because if your spouse knows what direction you're going, when they spot opportunities where they are, they can talk about where you are going. Lambert, if you could just mute yourself, there's a lot of background. So you could where was I? Yeah, so um, this is where communication is very important because when you communicate with your spouse and you both know where you're going, it means when you're having conversations in your different corners and something like that comes up or you hear of an opportunity, you can pass that on to the next person who can take it and make something out of it. But if that communication is not happening because you're in your little corner feeling inadequate, not wanting to talk about anything, thinking you're going to sort it all by yourself, no man is an island and nothing is going to happen. Where your dynamic wife could have gone somewhere, knocked on doors, and say and sold you, in fact, to a point where the people will be begging to have your services. She would be incapacitated because she doesn't even know what you believe in. That is what ego does when it engenders lack of communication. That void in communication destroys lives. And it takes away opportunities where there was a lot of potential. So when a man isn't able to provide, will communication still be the same between the parents? It depends. It is a matter for the parents. If they know where they're going, if they are parents, because again, mother and father is different from parents. If they are parents, then they will unite in the face of their adversities. If their adversities cause them to separate, then are they really parents? And we're using these words carefully because parents are people who unite, come together, bring their resources together to ensure that everyone's needs are being met. Everyone is being met at their point of need and that their wants are equally being fulfilled. That is the job description of a parent. And they're equally making sure that their own needs are being met. So if they're not doing that, are they really parents? And if they are parents, how and why would communication suffer? Lambert, do you want to just bring that up again? Just 1 second. I just want to be sure I've covered everything. Proper upbringing. Factors beyond the man's control can affect him from being a better parent. So I guess we've answered that, James. Lambert asked you the question. Give us an example of what could be beyond the man's control. No job. When you have no job, can you still give love? I mean, you spend a whole lot of your life, a good chunk of your life, you didn't have a job. You survived. Not having a job, does that mean it's the end of the world? Does that mean you can't love? How will that stop you from being a parent? There are parents who do not have jobs. And if you do not have a job, sometimes it is a call. Sometimes something is telling you, someone is kicking you in the butt and telling you that you shouldn't be an employee, you should be an employer. So the question now is, what is this whole job acronym just over broke? What is it that you are clinging onto? And should you maybe become uh, an employer, a job provider, as opposed to one who seeks jobs, who's looking for jobs? And do you know of any condition that is permanent? Because if you once had a job, it means someone once valued you. Someone saw you and thought you were good for something, good at something. Now, you would notice most people will tell you that when they lost a job, they moved on to the next one. What happened? It was almost like they just had a pay raise. The environment was better, the people were better, the money was better. So the question now is, how do we live? How do we navigate the uncharted territories of our lives? Because this is a place of uncertainty, a place of the unknown, and we know that's where opportunity lives. Because if you do today what you did yesterday, then all you will have is what you got yesterday. You keep repeating the past because that is what you know. That is security. The absence of a job throws you in a place where you need to now think out of the box. You need to embrace other opportunities. You need to expand, broaden, widen your horizons. You need to become more innovative than you were, leave the zone of complacency and embrace the zone of opportunity. And usually, when you do that, something bigger and something better comes that makes you an even better dad. But if you saw it as a knock, if you saw it as the end of the world, then guess what? You are right. It becomes the end of the world.
So Jane says, will it be different if the woman can't provide for the kids? I love that question. What is the dollar value of love, connection, and psychosocial support that we can provide for our kids? Again, I think it's that balancing act, isn't it?
Thank you, Jane.
You
Yeah,
can.
absolutely. So will it be different if the woman can't provide for the kids? What is the dollar value of love? You can't put money on love. You can't put money on connection. You can't put money on psychosocial support. You absolutely cannot. And again, when we talk about provision, what are we? I like the fact that Jane put it again in single quotes because we identify that the fact that the things that we need in life, the things that we thrive on, are usually typically not material. They're non tangible. Our values, the things that drive us, they are non tangible. Our mores, the things that guide us, are non tangible. Our ethos, the things that support us, are non tangible. They are the substance of which character is built and from which behavior takes its rise. And when we get these right, everything else falls in place. But when we focus on what it is we can get in order to become someone, then we get all those things and those things ruin us. They undefine us as opposed to define us. And I believe that is pretty much what Jane has captured here rather well. Will it be different if a woman can't provide for the kids? And again, this becomes sometimes a point of discord. Oh, you're not doing anything. Once that conversation kicks in, all it has done is identified a problem that existed between these two people. A rivalry that was there has always been there, and or insecurities, vulnerabilities that have become insecurities, and we're looking for someone to blame. We're looking for a head to roll, and we forget that if you attack your spouse, you've attacked the kids. Because when the spouse is not in a good place, when mommy is not in a good place, no one in that household can be in a good place. Just as if a wife attacks the husband, it muddies the water, kills the mood at home, the kids suffer. So whenever parents are at it, it's a sign they don't love their kids enough. Now, whether we admit it or not, when parents start fighting each other, it means their problems, their challenges, and their difficulties are more important than the welfare of the kids. Otherwise, they would not.
So James says we also have to balance how much love we give or show because some of it can be destructive and can prevent the kid from growing fully. I guess it's this
Okay.
thing of being overprotective and it's kind of tricky, but I leave that. I like to hear your take on that.
Yes, James. Again, we misunderstand love. I'll quote the Bible. Go and ask Pharaoh to let my people go. I will harden his heart. Now, when you listen to that verse, that Bible verse, it's almost like God is trying to make an example of Pharaoh. But if you look at it again, you realize that God is love. Um, I would like to say I apologize to those who don't particularly believe in God or any deity, but again, I can't because, hey, we're allowed to have different opinions. But the principle, the concept remains the same, that of love. Because I'm sure if you understand love, then you understand God. The entity I call God is the embodiment of love in all its forms. So, what do we notice here? What this verse is actually doing is it is saying, go and ask Pharaoh to let my people go. If Pharaoh lets my people go, it will actually edify him because he's using people to work for others as slaves, which means these people don't get to become enlightened to a point where they can actually self actualize. They become so dependent. Pharaoh himself gets to a place where he needs all these magicians and talisman people and all whatnot, which means he gets to sleep with one eye open. He's not at peace, he's not at ease. But if he can accept this, if he can humble himself and take this on, he will understand love and the light of love will transform him. But if he resists it, then of course, that same love will kill him. Because it's not like God does not like Pharaoh. So, what am I saying with this? Where am I going to with this? James, what I'm saying is there's no such thing as excessive love. When it becomes excessive, you're spoiling the child, and that is not love. When I truly love you, it means if you're doing something that is wrong, I have a moral obligation to correct you. I'm sure you would agree with me, James, that if I smile over everything you do that is wrong, I see you putting your hand in fire and I just smile because, oh, I love you. I don't want to hurt your feelings. What that fire will do to you will be 10 times more than what I could ever do to you. And this is what we fail to understand. When a child throws a tantrum or gets naughty, a mother corrects that child. That is love in action. If you turn a blind eye, then you do not love that child because all that love does, let's look at the properties of love. Love will procreate, love will create, love will give, love will forgive, love will heal. And when you bring all of these together, it requires patience to do any and all of these. And it means you need to surgically go into the situation, identify the problem, and use that love, which is infinite patience, to correct the situation. And that is love in action. Anything outside of that, anything that compromises the person you're engaging with is something else. It is not love. Which is why if your husband is doing something wrong, going south, going in the wrong direction, And instead of correcting him as you would your kids, you massage his ego and you pat him on the back and you say, "Oh no, honey, don't worry, I'm going to deal with it." You don't really love your husband, do you? You see, because if you correct your kids when they do something wrong, and I ask you why you're doing it, and you say, "Oh, it's because I love them," and you do the exact opposite with your husband when he's going wrong or awry, and I ask you and you say you love them, surely in one of these situations, you're telling a lie. You can't love two people and do completely opposite things to these two people. I'm sure we would all agree. So we sometimes do not understand love and we forget that love is very ruthless. Because love is a thing that will tell you you're doing wrong, you're going wrong when you're going wrong. It will not wait for you to calm down. I tell you that because I love you. If I have to wait for you to calm down, you would be in your right senses. And whatever it is I'm trying to say to you, I'm sure you could say it to me a lot better because you're more articulate than even I am. So the challenge is for me to tell you when it is happening there and then. And if I can reach you there, then I know we've dealt with the problem. If I can get you to make a U-turn in the heat of that activity, then I know that I've gotten through to you. And in my books, that is what love is, James.
BK, you're becoming a drag on my productivity. I work from home, but I can't help being razor focused on your astute take on the cutting edge issues of the day at the expense of my job. This is the baddest show on the land. Great job, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jude. And he says, James, BK knows how to present his message with simplicity. That's a beautiful way to explain what love is from what is not. Thanks, BK. Again, these are men. They are appreciating it, and we are glad that we are able to make a little bit of impact. Today, we're focusing on challenges of parenting. Um, Again, I think the main takeaway is being present. And I think the point that Jane was making about being present and being able to provide. BK's point is, yes, be able to do that, but what do you actually mean by providing? What is provision? What are you providing? Are you staying on the physical? Are you just providing food, shelter, and all that? Are you paying the bills and doing all that? Yes, very important, but beyond that, there's something more important than just being able to provide that. And I think our kids become better when we as men are present in their lives, providing both the physical and all other things that are supposed to come with that. And most important things in life are free. Most important things in life are free. Presence is free. And so when we start making excuses, there are excuses for things that we just do not want to do. BK, any last words?
All I can say is you guys are the heroes of what it is we're doing. Without you all, we would not be here. For me, it's an honor and it's a pleasure to spend these Monday nights with you all. This is the highlight of my week to be able to connect with people who share the same values, people who sing from the same hymn sheet, people who are all moving in the same direction. You are what I call my tribe. People I could turn to, lean on, rely on if I felt lost. You guys are those guys. Because I know that if I was going in the wrong direction, if I'm going in the wrong direction tomorrow, I count on you guys to say, "Hey, BK, you can't do this. This is not the path." See, because like you, I'm not invincible. This is a difficult journey. When we embark on it, trust me, there will be all kinds of challenges crawling out of the woodwork to make sure that we do not get to where we're looking to go. And let's not forget that our overarching aim is to eradicate depression from the planet. And how do we plan to do that? Twofold. We want to get people to a place where they understand these rituals, these tenets, these values, these morals, these principles, what it is that makes life. We want to get people to a place where they understand that A family is not a tick box type exercise. A family is the best gift that there is on the planet because it works on you just as you work on it. And it is mutually beneficial when we embrace it. And if we can find life and find peace and find fulfillment in that journey, then clearly, I'm sure we all agree, that whole concept of depression becomes a thing of the past. Why? Because I'm sure nobody has ever seen a happy, depressed person. So depression is because happiness and fulfillment went out the door. So if we can restore that, and usually depression is lifestyle induced, we start having these challenges which we do not know how to navigate because we do not have a tribe we can turn to. We do not have people we could have a conversation with. We do not have people who could turn on the light into those dark areas and corners in our lives that we protect. We do not have the people who can show us that it's okay to fall, it's okay to slide, it's okay to tumble, but it's not okay to give up. If we don't have any of that, then we keep falling back on those who can't find them, who do not have any bearings themselves. And the blind can lead the blind. But people who are going somewhere, people who want to make it, people who want to get somewhere, that conviction, that intention, that steadfastness is enough to attract what we need, not just to see the road, but to chart a course and to make a path, make a way where there is or was no way. And so, to end, all I can say is I celebrate you guys like you will never know. Thank you. And I look forward to catching up again next week.
Thank you very much, BK. I want to thank those who were able to join us live. Again, as always, this is going to continue on my Facebook page, YouTube channel, all that. We'll continue our conversations next week. As usual, we'll figure out something within the week. For the first time, we don't have a topic for next week, but we'll get to it. It's been great. We have had 2 conversations about fatherhood. Let's take the opportunity to improve on the services. That's the wrong word. I think on being present in a way that makes an impact on our family lives, that makes an impact on ourselves and on our families. Just be present. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for being present. I'll see you all again on Monday next week. Thank you and bye bye.